Hey, what's up, Hardstylers? It's Hector here, the Kettlebell Coach. In this video, we're going to be unpacking part 3 of the Upstream Strength Strategy series. And what we're going to be talking about are 2 upstream decisions that you can make today if you're not making progress with your kettlebell press or any particular goal that you might be pursuing. Even if you've been following the performance progression training system that we outlined in part 2 of this series. So that's what we will be unpacking today. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name's Hector Gutierrez Jr. And for over 12 and a half years, I ran one of only 2 kettlebell-only training facilities here in Texas, where we helped men and women 40 plus, where we taught them how to use kettlebells to build a stronger, leaner, and more capable body in about 90 minutes per week. So ultimately, they could have more time to do what they enjoy doing and spend less time trying to be the best at exercise. So if that sounds like you, welcome to the channel. Now, if you're just joining us, I recommend checking out part 1 and 2 of this series first. I'll link it up here in one of the corners. Watch part 1 and 2 to give you context of what it is that we're talking about. This whole idea of upstream thinking, right? And how it will help you use kettlebells to build a stronger, leaner, and more capable body before exercise even begins. That's the whole premise here, is how to improve your results before exercise even starts. All right. So watch parts 1 and 2 for context. So part 1 are the 3 upstream strength strategies for better results with kettlebells. Part 2 is about how to use the performance progression training system to build upper body strength, particularly in the context of building a bigger and stronger kettlebell press. Okay. So check that out before you dive into this video. Now, and also check the timestamps that I've got below in the description if you want to move around or revisit something that we covered in today's episode. Okay, so what inspired these 2 upstream decisions? I want to share a story with you of a close friend of mine, one of my students. His name's Brian. He texted me. This was, I think, around 2021. I got this text from him, and it said, I have less than 5 weeks to press the 48 kilogram and I don't know what to do, exclamation mark. Like, that was the text that I got. It was either in the middle, like late in the evening, or it was just kind of out of nowhere. And if you're new to the kettlebell space, the 48 kilogram kettlebell, that's 106 pounds. So all the kettlebells are weighed in kilograms, where initially in Russia, they were weighed in poods. But eventually they've been weighed in kilograms because they're European. And in my opinion, it just makes lifting weights a lot easier, lifting weights in kilograms versus pounds. But that's another discussion. But the 48 kilograms is referred to as the beast. And if you are, I believe, over 220 pounds and you're trying to certify for the level 2 strong first certification, you have to press half of your body weight. And if you're over 221 pounds, you have to press the 48 kilo, i.e. the beast. And Brian had reached out and he was like, dude, I've got less than 5 weeks and I don't know what to do. So we jumped on the phone. We started working through, okay, where you're at, what are you doing? Like, kind of getting some information. And he said, man, right now I'm pressing the 40 kilogram, and the 40 kilogram feels like the 48 should feel. Like, it's just very heavy, very difficult. And I'm struggling to press this thing, 1 to 3 times. And so what we did is we set a plan of what to do over the course of the next 4 weeks, and that 5th week leading him into the certification. And I told him here are the 3 things that you need to do. Okay. The first thing you need to do is, number 1, stop kettlebell pressing altogether. I'll tell you why I made that recommendation here in just a moment. I told him next we need to switch to body weighted push-ups. And then to recertify his kettlebell snatch test, which he had to do with a 28 kilogram because he's over 221 pounds, he had to snatch a kettlebell pretty much that he'd never really snatched before. And his initial response to that was, yeah, I called the wrong person. Like, there's no way. Like, what you're telling me to do is I need to be pressing this kettlebell, and you're telling me not press the kettlebell. You're telling me to get off the kettlebell to do body weighted push-ups, and you're telling me to snatch a weight that's heavier than I'm used to training with. And so his initial thought was, I made a mistake calling you. Now, here's why I made that recommendation. The reason why I told him to stop pressing the kettlebell altogether. So there's a common mantra, there's a common adage or a belief system, if you will, that in order to press a lot, meaning in order to press a heavy weight, you need to press a lot, meaning you need to press more often. You got to get your reps in. And there's a lot of truth to that. In order to press heavy, a heavy bell, yeah, you got to get your volume in. Strength, long-term strength is built through volume. So that's true. And it works very well until it doesn't. At a certain point, your body, your nervous system will begin to reject the press altogether. Particularly, it will reject the pattern of vertical pressing. And that was a key reason why I made the recommendation of him coming off of the kettlebell press, because it's a vertical pressing pattern. And eventually, as you're working through the press, and really any exercise, it could be chin up, pull up, kettlebell press, deadlift, it could be anything. Over time, you eventually you hit the point of diminished returns. And once your body rejects a particular pattern, you need to think further upstream to solve that problem. And so there's two upstream decisions that we made that ultimately moved him forward. Number one, well, before that, before I get into the two upstream decisions, at the end of 4 weeks, going into the 5th week, I got a phone call from him freaking out because he pressed the 48 by accident and he crushed his snatch test. So how did we do that? Well, these are the two upstream decisions that we made. And after you watch parts 1 and 2, you'll understand why I say upstream thinking it's difficult to understand, because the effects are not invincible, it's invisible. Like, they're intangible. You really won't know the benefits, or you wouldn't know the problem that you overcame by thinking further upstream. If it's thinking upstream, it requires you to expand your thinking. It's not the same thing as being proactive. And so the first thing that we did, the essence of what we did, was we changed the environment. We had him shift from a vertical press environment to a horizontal press environment. What that does is it resets the system, if you will. It's like this. Imagine you're in a room. And someone's making bacon. Someone's making bacon, and you're like, man, that smells so good. But after you've been in the environment for a period of time, you become desensitized to the smell of bacon. Well, how do you reset the senses so that way you can appreciate the smell of bacon? You need to leave the room. You need to leave the room. You need to change your environment and then reintroduce the previous environment. So if you were to be in a room where they're cooking nothing but bacon, smells delicious, you go outside, you go for a 10-minute walk, you come back, and you'll probably smell the bacon before you even get inside the house. It resets the nervous system. Okay. So similarly, our body works the same way. This works with nutrition also. Like, you can't stay in a caloric deficit indefinitely. Eventually, you need to reset the system and eat at maintenance or above maintenance for a period of time, and then revisit that environment of a caloric deficit. So the same thing works with our physiology. And so just by changing the environment, we reset the system and had him get off the kettlebell altogether, the kettlebell in terms of kettlebell pressing. So what we did was we switched training discipline environments. The second thing that we did was we switched to power. We moved him up the performance progression pyramid. We talked about this in part 2. Both decisions, well, number one, we shifted from pure strength to power. So the goal was since we were going to be working on, since the intensity or the intensity was going to be lighter because it's body weight, we could now focus on more dynamic, more explosive movements. And so we switched to an explosive power, two-handed power push-up. And so by moving him up the performance progression pyramid, both of the decisions were a change in the nature of load. So if you see here, this diagram in October of 2023, I had the pleasure and honor of co-teaching a seminar with Pavel Sachalin and Fabio Zanin, Master Strong First Instructor. And the workshop was called Programming Demystified. And my talk was on the efficacy of performance progression training. And what I did was I adapted the National Academy of Sports Medicine's OPT model, optimum performance training, where the traditional model of OPT training is strength stability, like building a base of stability, strength endurance, then muscle building, i.e. hypertrophy, then maximal strength, and then power. Now, the challenge with that is how do we adapt that to kettlebells? Now, when we say performance progression training, we're not referring to energy systems. We're not referring to specific exercises. We're not referring to training methods. What we are referring to is the nature of the load. Remember, think upstream, like the essence of what we're doing here. So if you look at this diagram here, stabilization training, right? If we're looking at the OPT model, you got stabilization training. So traditionally, we've got stability balls, BOSU balls, half foam rolls, like other proprioceptive enriched exercises. And the reason why the National Academy of Sports Medicine sets their system up the way that it does, because it has a lot of physical therapy background behind the curriculum, and it's a great system. But obviously, we're kettlebell biased here on this channel, and we try to take a minimalist, less is more approach, so fewer moving parts, so that way we can remain and be consistent with what we're doing. And if we're being honest, stability balls and these things, they get a little boring after a while. So how can we adapt this to kettlebells? Well, single kettlebell training develops strength stability because now you are loaded asymmetrically and you start to create this cross-body stabilization. So compared to using a stability or BOSU ball, single kettlebell training by nature places you in a proprioceptively enriched environment. That's a fancy term for working on your balance, working on your stability. So example, loading the kettlebell on one side, if you're not engaging your midsection reflexively, your body, it wants to pull you to one side. As you're pressing, you're going to want to lean to one side. So the idea here in stability is to not move. Can the cylinder maintain integrity as I work on this press, as I work on single leg deadlift, as I work on my get up, arm bar? Replacing and the nature of that, this is why, in my opinion, kettlebells are superior to any other training tool. And I'll get into why I don't even look at it as a tool per se. The nature of the bell, every time that bell moves, because that center of gravity is offset, right? We're holding it by the handle, but the weight's here offset compared to a dumbbell where the weight sits in your hand. I got a little mini kettlebell. A friend of mine got me this as a gift, a little 1 pounder for my desk. So if we look at this, okay, I'm holding the bell by the handle, but the weight is offset. The weight's down here, okay? Versus holding it like a dumbbell or a barbell would be like holding it from the actual the ball, if you will, the kettlebell here. But every time this bell moves, the center of mass changes. The nature of that load requires more muscle recruitment to stabilize that load. So the very nature of using a kettlebell, one, by the nature of the center of mass, promotes stability training. And the very nature of single kettlebell work or asymmetrical work places you in an environment to build stability. Tactics like rush and rest pause. So we look at strength endurance. Traditionally, low loads, high repetitions, right? So to build strength endurance, you'll see people use like a very light weight and they're doing 10 to 15 repetitions to build the motor pattern, to build the strength endurance of the muscle, you name it. Well, if we look at performance progression, We can use medium loads, low reps, and we can leverage a tactic called Russian rest pause. So an example of Russian rest pause would be like traditional rest pause would be, let's say we're going to do 3 clean and presses. So you're going to do clean, press, you'd put the bell down, shake it out for a brief moment, clean, press, and you'd repeat that for 3 reps. Well, the evil Russians would have you rest in the rack position. This is something we take our students through in our level 1 coaching, is this how to execute this Russian rest pause. So what you would do is, if we're going to do 3 repetitions, you'd clean the bell, you'd press it, and then you'd bring it in, and then you'd hold it until we would cue them for the next press. So example of, if we're doing 3 presses, we'd probably do a press every 20 seconds. The nature of holding that bell, maintaining connection and linkage, it promotes hypertrophy because you're under tension longer, but it also builds strength endurance as well. So compared to using light weights and high repetitions, using medium loads with rest pause, by nature, places you in an environment to build strength endurance. It keeps you under tension longer, and it increases your opportunity for hypertrophy, i.e. muscle building. If we look further up, we get into maximal strength, right? Traditionally, maximal strength training is training, let's say if we're looking at barbells, you can even do this with kettlebells, but if you're looking at traditionally barbells, training at a percentage of 1 rep maximum is a very traditional way to build maximum strength. Well, by performance progression, just doubling up on kettlebells, using 2 kettlebells builds maximal strength. It helps you build muscle and endurance, right? It places you in an environment to build those attributes. So compared to primarily training at percentage of 1 rep maximum, progressing from single kettlebell to double kettlebells by nature places you in an environment of systemic overload. And as a result, you build maximal strength. I'm in the middle of I've got a very specific goal that I'm trying to attain on my 48th birthday. And that is double 48-kilogram jerks for 48 minutes when I'm 48. And my goal is 90 reps in 45 minutes, but just for the sake of like 48 by 48 by 48 for some alliteration there. Now, ask yourself this question, because you always hear the debates, oh, you can't build maximal strength with kettlebells and barbells are superior. Hey, and I love barbells. I love barbell deadlifting particularly is my forte. I love barbell deadlifting. And I did barbell deadlifting exclusively for a very, 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 very long time, for about a 6-year straight period. And I built a fairly respectable deadlift. I believe my best deadlift, this was in 2018, was 290 kilos, was a 639 at 210 pounds body weight. So it was like 3.25 body weight, a deadlift without straps, no belt, just raw. I think I put in a lot of work, and I know a lot about barbell deadlifting and the programming that goes into that. But that's always the debate, right? Barbells, kettlebells versus barbells. You can't build maximal strength with kettlebells. So ask yourself this question: how strong do you think you would be if you built up to multiple sets of 3 to 5 with a pair of 48-kilogram bells? How strong do you think you will be if you can do 90 double jerks with a pair of 48 kilos in 45 minutes? How strong do you think you would be? How strong, how conditioned, how mobile, how athletic do you think you would be by training that one exercise? I mean, I think we all know the answer there, right? So the nature of doubling up on your kettlebells builds maximal strength. Now, if we look at the top part of this diagram here, power. So traditionally, we see like medicine ball throws, plyometrics, which is jump training. We have sprinting. Like, we have traditional means of developing power, fantastic means of developing power as well. But what if you are an individual, you're over 40, and you've got mileage? What if you've got, a knee thing or an ankle thing, and maybe maybe box jumps and plyometrics and depth jumps and sprinting, that might not be very gentle on your body, or not very forgiving is the word I'm looking for, on your body. But using 1 to 2 kettlebells, right? If we look at performance progression, the nature of the load, this is where kettlebell ballistics come in. They are submaximal plyometrics, meaning you get all of the benefits of power training, athleticism, quickness, speed, agility, quickness. You get all of that with a kettlebell without having to leave the ground. So it's very gentle on your ankles, your knees, your shoulders. Obviously, if you're programming it right and you know what you're doing, but you can reap all of those same benefits. So kettlebell ballistics, i.e., power training, they build athleticism and they build nonstop work capacity compared to traditional forms of power training like sprinting, plyometrics, medicine ball slams, right? Like, I've kind of gone through that list there. Kettlebell ballistics, like swings, cleans, snatches, jerks, those are the athletic movements, by their nature, create an environment to build your capacity to generate kinetic energy and strengthen your connective tissues and really build a resilient, capable body. This is why you hear me say things. This isn't just like marketing cliche stuff. Literally, it's how to use kettlebells to build a stronger, more capable body because of the nature of the load, the way that the kettlebell loads your musculoskeletal system, you will build a more resilient and more capable body. Why? Why would you want to do that? So you can do more of the things that you enjoy doing. Maybe you like running. Maybe you like getting out and playing golf or fishing or doing jujitsu or just playing and wrestling with your kids. We all have our own unique interest of why we do the things that we do when it comes to fitness, right? And kettlebells will allow you to do that. So the downstream effects of upstream thinking is the next thing I want to touch on. So in the first video of this series, and it was I'll link the blog articles that I wrote. I wrote up a blog article for each one of these videos. So if you want to check those out, I'll put those in the description as well. In the PS, if you will, in the bottom of the blog article of the first post in this series, I mentioned twice a problem which would keep you from seeing progress and leaving you trapped in the cumulative injury cycle. Right? And I also mentioned the upstream decision, which would solve that problem before it had a chance to present itself. So in my emails that I send to our private newsletter, in my blog posts, I like to leave little Easter eggs in there, just something to keep people thinking like, I don't know. What is that? What did he mean by that? Where was that in the post? I didn't see that. I like to drop little Easter eggs in there. And this is an Easter egg that I dropped at the bottom of that first post. And so what is that problem? What is that problem? And I mentioned it twice in that first article. What is that problem that could be keeping you from seeing progress? That problem is living in a flexed environment. All of us today, almost all of us today, live in a flexed environment. Look at me right now. I'm sitting down doing this podcast. If I'm not careful, my shoulders will slump forward, my head will project forward, my hips are flexed, my knees are flexed, everything's flexed. And we rarely leave that posture, that environment, because what happens is we go from sitting at our desk, doing work, whatever it is that we're doing, and then we go home and we sit and eat. And then we go to the couch and we sit and we watch TV. And like we're just always sitting. Even in jujitsu, jujitsu is a flexed, the environment of training your BJJ is you're in a flexed environment. You have to stay rounded up and curled into a ball because if you open up and are exposed, people can pass your guard, people can mount you, people can attack your legs, they can attack your arms. So a lot of it is this flexed environment. Okay. So even if doing physical activity, you're not free from this flexed environment. And even if you were to go to the gym and work out, we see all these machines, people sit in a machine and we push and pull on things. So we're just always in this flexed environment. And this is not a judgment on anyone, but this is just what it is. The upstream solution is to create an environment of extension. And the very nature of using kettlebells places you in an extended environment. Everything you do aside from the get up is done standing, and you go into an extended environment. You extend your, if we're look at the jerk. That's why I love the double jerk. The double jerk from the in the naked eye, I think it looks like a triple extension exercise. It looks like you're doing a jump shot. You're going into ankle extension, you're going into knee extension, you're going to hip extension. Okay. Obviously, your arms are flexing as you bring your arms overhead. But when you do the clean, you're going into an extended position. So you get a lot of extension there. But there's one other extension. I cover this in my video on the jerk called the 4 extensions. There's a fourth extension, and that's the extension of the thoracic part of the spine, the ability to open the rib cage. And so the jerk takes you into all levels of extension. Kettlebell swing takes you into hip extension, clean. Again, everything that you do aside from the get up is done standing, promoting an extended environment. And the downstream effects of an extended environment is a stronger, leaner, and more capable body in less time before exercise even begins. So you're setting yourself up for success just by the nature of learning how to use kettlebells. The submaximal nature of the kettlebell ballistics are great, as I mentioned, for people who have mileage. Jumping and sprinting are not for everyone. However, everyone can benefit from the effects of submaximal plyometric training, the very nature of load that the kettlebells provide. So essentially, you reap all the benefits of power training without leaving the ground, without all of the wear and tear that comes with dynamic exercise. And this is why, in my honest and professional opinion, that kettlebells are superior to all training tools that are out there. Now, you might say, well, Hector, this makes sense. You run a kettlebell channel, a kettlebell business. No, I don't say kettlebells are the best because I have a kettlebell business. I choose kettlebells because they are the best. And I've done everything that's out there. Everything I've ever done athletically was to help me to get better at jiu-jitsu in terms of athletics, cardiovascular training, flexibility. I became a yoga teacher. I did running. I did bodybuilding style training. I've done everything, but nothing could give me everything that I needed in one package without interfering with my time on the mat until I came across the kettlebell. This was around 2006. So the kettlebell is not just a tool. You hear people say that a lot. It's a training tool. In my opinion, working with over 1,200 plus one-on-one clients at our gym, it drives me nuts when I hear people say that it's just it's just a training tool. The kettlebell, by its nature, is an upstream strength strategy, which is responsible for providing you with results and avoiding problems that you would never even be aware of. And the planning of your training requires upstream thinking so you can ultimately train for the long haul. So the nature of load is an environmental change. That is a result of upstream thinking. I mentioned this in, I think it was part 1 or part 2 of this series. The key difference between being proactive and thinking upstream, they're not the same thing. Here's an example to distinguish them. Being proactive with your health and fitness is working out so you stay healthy, cardiovascular health, strength, eating healthy food so that we have energy, etc. That's being proactive. Upstream thinking is a complete change in environment. This way you don't have to rely on willpower. Like, willpower is not something that's going to get you to where you want to be. But if you change your environment and you create density within that environment, I'll talk about that in another video, you have more opportunities to be successful. You see this all over the place. Like, you see people that struggle with addictions to alcohol, drugs, you name it. Well, what are your best chances of not consuming alcohol? Well, not being around it, changing your environment. But if you surround yourself with, places that serve alcohol or friends that, drink alcohol, more than likely you're going to be drinking alcohol that night. Right. So it's not enough to be proactive. We want to think further upstream. And a complete change in environment is an example of that. So the results of these decisions and the effects they had on Brian's training, well, I'll let you tell. I kind of teased that a little bit already, but I'll let Brian tell you himself. Up here in the corner will be a video to his success story and the conversation that he had with me before he even got started, and then what happened at the end of 4 weeks. But I'll just say, as I've already mentioned, after about 4 weeks, he called me from his level 2 and he said, I'll never doubt you. Like, I'll never doubt you ever again. And which is a fair reason to doubt someone when they tell you to not do the thing that you should be testing and training for, right? So in this video here in the top corner and in the end of this video, you can check out how Brian went from pressing a 40 kilogram kettlebell to a 48 kilogram kettlebell and crushing his 5-minute SFG snatch test with a 28 in less than 5 weeks. That's all I got for you today. If you're liking these videos, if this helped you out, and if you want to be updated and up to date with the last video in this series of Upstream Thinking, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, turn on notifications so you can be up to date with the next video in this series. And that's all I got for you today. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.